A friend and I were hiking near the Turner Falls area of Oklahoma on July 10th. We ventured off a bit into the mountains there to get away from all the tourists swimming in the pool. As we began climbing the mountain, we began to notice a foul smell. It smelled like old, crusty, dried-up urine, mixed with rotting wood and musk. It's kind of hard to explain, but the odor was bad enough that we made several comments as we climbed as to how it was making us gag. However, the smell would come and go. It was not constant, and we found that a bit peculiar. However, we really didn't think anything of it, because although we were in a pretty remote part of the park, we thought it was probably just from the campers or other hikers. At one point near the top, we stopped to rest and test our blood sugars. We were both diabetics, and the smell blew in again. We started to look around to see what could be causing it. I spotted a tree, a type of pine, that at about 6'12" feet up, had been twisted completely around and snapped down. I immediately pointed it out to my friend, who also is quite the Bigfoot enthusiast. And we began discussing that, because of the thickness of the tree, the height at which it was twisted, and our remote location, we didn't believe that had been done by some hiker. For one, I don't know anybody strong enough to do that. Also, we noted it wasn't wind that did it because it looked somewhat fresh and the trees surrounding it were fine, as were their branches, and there was no wind that day. As we began to look around, we spotted several more branches, both thick and thin, that looked the same, twisted and snapped down. Hikers could have done some of them, I suppose, but the majority of them were on branches or trees too thick for something without very large hands and powerful strength to break. Interestingly enough, the first break I noticed looked almost identical to the picture of a tree twist on your website, under the habitat section. My friend then looked to our left, down a bit from us, and said, "Look at that." There we saw several large branches that had been twisted and pulled down, though still connected to the trees, and laid, almost on top of each other, with mud and smaller sticks caked into it. This looked very similar to the nest pictures you have on your website. In fact, when we returned later that night to her house in McKinney, I got on the internet, pulled up the pictures of the tree twists and nests on your website and showed them to her. Her response was, "That's it. That's what we saw." After seeing all this, we began to feel a little out of place. We got really quiet and a little scared. At that point, that smell blew in again, and suddenly, it hit me. Could it be Bigfoot? The thought had honestly never crossed my mind before we saw the tree breaks. So, tired and pretty freaked out, we left the mountain and began to hike back down to where there were people. I did, however, take pictures of the tree breaks and the nest. Unfortunately, leaving my camera in the car for a couple of days, in the intense heat, the film got warped and many of the pictures did not come out. However, a picture of the first tree break, which caught my eye, did turn out okay. Not hearing any noises or seeing anything, and understanding that while we were off the beaten path, we were still in an area that has heavy foot traffic, I have not ruled out the possibility that the culprits were campers. At all. However, due to the remarkable similarities in what we saw and what is on your website, the fact that we were in a heavily forested area with low human population, in an area surrounded by water, semi-mountainous, the smell which smelled almost exactly like every description I've heard of them smelling, and hearing that Bigfoot has kind of an infatuation with campers, especially their food. I cannot rule out the possibility that we may have stumbled into the habitat of a Sasquatch. We have a lot of land leased on the San Jacinto River bottom. My wife, son, and I spend a lot of time there. There are some other people on the lease with us, and they spend a lot of time on it also. I have not told the other people on the lease about what I saw. I was fishing at the time, and I had my 2 dogs with me that are old hog dogs. The dogs are now retired from hunting. We were on the lease by ourselves at the time. It was a Friday morning. It was cool morning, very quiet. I was walking around a lake of about 30 acres and fishing from the bank. The 2 old dogs from camp came with me. These dogs have hunted a lot in these and nearby woods. I went to camp and no one was there, so I went up to a lake coming in on the main road and started to fish the banks. The dogs started to not howl but moan, and they went back towards the camp. At first I thought nothing of it, but as they got down the road they were very loudly yapping. I thought it must be coyotes coming around, and I had a Bushmaster AR rifle on my shoulder, so I put down my pole and walked into some brush close by. I had the rifle with me, and I was not scared, but I was very caught off guard. I just put a round in the chamber and started to watch, and I saw a very large, dark, upright thing come out of the swamp area across the road. I could have shot it, but I did not know what it was. It must have been 400 or 500 lbs and close to 7 feet tall. It was a very large, upright animal, but it moved unlike anything that I have seen in the woods before, and I spend a lot of time in the woods. It had dark brown to dark red hair, long hair, 2 to 3 inches long, shaggy and matted somewhat. It looked like it had no neck with a very large upper body and long arms, but it looked like it was as scared of me as I was of it. No smell. It had eyes that looked like a hog or bear eyes, but it looked at me like no other animal ever has. As soon as I moved to get a better look and sight on it, it just jumped back into the woods and was gone. There was nothing but muddy water where it went back into the woods. I looked for tracks and there was none. I started into the area where it went, but I felt something that I never felt in the woods before. A very bad feeling, like I was not to be there. I went back to the road and went to camp. No one was at camp, so I went home. On the way out, there was a large tree branch across the road where I saw the animal. I just want to know what it was I saw. My husband and I decided to go to Palmetto State Park on our way home from New Braunfels to enjoy a nice hike. We began our hike at the beginning of the San Marcos River Trail. We were the only ones on the trail that day. At the beginning of our hike, my husband noticed what looked like an extremely large footprint to the left of the trail. We didn't think much of it and kept on our journey. We came to a spot where you can walk down to the river and swim or fish. We both walked down the bank to the river to check out the spot. After taking a small break, we started back up the bank. I was in front of him when I heard him holler that somebody had just thrown a large rock at him. I thought he was trying to scare me, so I didn't pay much attention. When we got to the top of the bank to the trail, he told me that something had thrown a large baseball-sized rock at him, which hit right behind him in the sand and rolled down the hill. He was visibly upset. We continued on our hike. While on the San Marcos River Trail, we continued to hear noises in the woods and breaking sticks, but contributed it to local wildlife. Then we heard a strange howl. It was similar to that of a cow, but different. Now, I know there are cows in the area, which we heard and saw many times during the hike, but I know what a cow sounds like, and my husband grew up around and currently works in the slaughter business, so he has heard every sound a cow can make. What we heard was not a cow. We heard this howl once while on the San Marcos River Trail, and then again when we cut off onto the Mesquite Flats Trail. While on the Mesquite Flats Trail, we continued to be observant of our surroundings, but enjoy our relaxing hike. Somewhere on the trail, not far past one bridge but before another, we both heard a loud crack and falling of a large limb out of a tree right by the end of the first bridge on the trail we had just crossed. We then heard running through the woods. It was not like a person running, but was also not like a deer. It was a loud thump sound when whatever it was hit the ground. My eyes immediately scanned the tree line and focused in on a tall, black something. I could clearly see the thing pass past and between trees. It was tall and black, but very fast. It was faster than a person. It was not a deer because I could see its silhouette. It was not long. It was not a hog because it was tall and not long like an animal. I was watching it pass through the trees when it just disappeared, like it had stopped or something. I was in shock by what I had just seen. My husband and I walked back to where the limb had hit the ground to see if we could see anything. Unfortunately, we did not have any binoculars, but off in the distance where the thing disappeared from my sight, it appeared to be some type of black thing, either crouched or standing completely still beside a tree. We decided it was best that we make our way to the trail and head to the end, but we kept watch on the black thing we saw by the tree. The trees got thick and we could not see through for a moment, but when we got to another opening, we attempted to find the black thing by the tree we had just seen, and it was no longer there. We continued our walk with Alot to talk about. Once we crossed onto the Atin Swamp Trail, we heard the howl again, but close and clearer than before. We completed our hike with no other incidents or noises. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life.